Let's be honest here. You're exhausted from people. And it's not because you hate them, far from it. It's because their stupidity irritates you in a way you can no longer ignore. Pretend you don't see, or act like it doesn't bother you. You look around and see people repeating the same canned phrases without thinking, arguing about completely absurd things on social media as if they were life or death matters, having totally empty conversations that lead nowhere, that don't touch anything real, that just fill silence. And the worst part is that this irritation doesn't come from arrogance, doesn't come from you thinking you're better than anyone, doesn't come from moral or intellectual superiority. It comes from lucidity itself, from having started to see patterns of unconsciousness that are everywhere, everywhere you look. You see people living on absolute autopilot, repeating opinions that aren't even theirs, but that they picked up from some influencer or some social group, following paths they never consciously chose, but that were imposed as the only possible option. And this tires you, exhausts you in a profound way that you can't even explain properly to those who've never felt it. And then you find yourself in that strange and uncomfortable place. Because you still genuinely love these people. You didn't suddenly become a misanthrope who hates everyone, but living daily with so much voluntary blindness, with so much meaningless noise that leads nowhere, with so much unconscious repetition of destructive patterns. This takes a high psychological toll that you didn't know you'd have to pay when you started to awaken. The truth is, you started to see how the world really works, without filters, without illusions, without that protective layer most people keep intact to avoid going insane. The illusions fell one by one like a house of cards. You see lies being sold as absolute truth, superficiality being celebrated as if it were depth, mediocrity being treated as a virtue worthy of applause. You turn on the TV and see news broadcasts clearly manipulating information, shaping narratives, creating realities that serve specific interests. You open social media and see everyone performing a completely edited and fake version of themselves, faking happiness they don't feel, flaunting achievements they don't have, creating personas that don't exist in real life. You look at the system as a whole and see conditioning patterns repeating themselves for generations and generations without absolutely anyone questioning anything. Everyone just accepts and reproduces and passes it forward. And the worst part is that when you try to talk about this, when you try to gently show what you're seeing, people look at you as if you were the problematic one in the story, as if you were the negative one ruining the mood, as if you were the crazy one seeing things that don't exist. But the raw truth is that you just woke up. You just started to see through the thick smokescreen that everyone else prefers to keep intact, because it's infinitely more comfortable to live in the shared illusion than to face the naked truth that hurts. And Jung understood this perfectly. He lived it firsthand. He knew that awakening to consciousness takes a very high psychological toll, takes profound loneliness, takes social isolation, takes the devastating feeling of no longer belonging anywhere, of floating between worlds without anchorage. And then comes that tiredness that isn't physical at all. It's from the soul itself. It's existential. It's spiritual, if you want to call it that. You can sleep 10, 12 hours a night. You can take a whole month vacation. You can rest as much as you want and as much as you can. But this tiredness simply doesn't pass, doesn't diminish, doesn't ease up even a little. Because it's not an exhaustion of the body that's resolved with rest. It's a deep and existential exhaustion from living daily with so much blindness around you, from being constantly surrounded by so much noise that means absolutely nothing, from seeing the same things repeating infinitely, cyclically, without anything really changing, without anything actually evolving. For Jung, and he studied this deeply for decades, this is the entire psyche clearly signaling that you're evolving beyond the average collective level, that you no longer fit in that tight space of shared unconsciousness where most people live comfortably without questioning anything. You look at people in their completely automatic, mechanical routines, waking up at the same time, working in the same place, consuming the same things, distracting themselves the same way, sleeping and repeating everything again the next day without ever stopping to question if this is really what they want from life. And you don't feel envy of this stability or admiration of this consistency. You just feel a deep and visceral tiredness from realizing that human life could be so much richer, so much deeper, so much more meaningful than this, but everyone seems completely satisfied with so little, with crumbs of existence. And you want to scream out loud. You want to physically shake people and desperately ask why no one questions anything. Why everyone simply accepts everything as if there were no other possible alternative. But you already know deep down that doing this won't help. Because whoever is sleeping deeply doesn't want to wake up at all. Prefers the lukewarm comfort of sleep to the acute pain of consciousness. And here comes a complex paradox you need to truly understand if you want to maintain your sanity. As much as you deeply love your family, your close friends, the people who genuinely are part of your life and who you don't want to lose, you need time alone. You need space. You need distance even. Not to cowardly run from them, not because you don't really like them, not because you're rejecting the bonds, but because without this essential alone time you will literally go insane, will completely lose your mind, will fragment. Jung deeply understood that individuation, this process of becoming who you really are, doesn't eliminate emotional bonds but completely transforms them, restructures them on healthier and more authentic foundations. You gradually learn to love without completely losing yourself in the other, to connect deeply without diluting and disappearing, to be genuinely present without completely nullifying yourself. Because the hard truth is that being constantly with people who don't minimally understand what you're going through, who don't see even half of what you see, who live on a completely different vibrational frequency than yours, this drains your vital energy in an absolutely brutal way, empties you completely. So you desperately need this time alone to reconnect with yourself, to internally process everything you're feeling and living, to not completely lose your mind trying uselessly to fit into a world that no longer makes any sense to you. And this isn't selfishness at all, it's not abandoning the people you love, it's psychic survival itself. It's you consciously choosing your mental sanity instead of continuing to pretend that everything is perfectly fine when clearly it's not, when you're disintegrating inside. And if you had the extremely rare luck, almost statistically improbable, of finding at least someone in this life who genuinely shares this deep feeling, someone who viscerally understands this existential tiredness, without automatically judging you as a bitter misanthrope, without desperately trying to fix you as if you were broken, without making you feel morally wrong or psychologically sick for feeling exactly this way, you were really lucky, a luck that most people will never have in life. Jung spoke specifically about rare alchemical encounters, about extremely specific people who catalyze our deepest transformation, who help us go through these painful processes without feeling completely alone and abandoned in the universe. This rare person concretely helps you deal with the absurd psychological stress of being awake in a deeply asleep world, validates you emotionally without needing elaborate words, understands you on a level that dispenses with complex explanations and endless rationalizations. Because the statistical truth is that the overwhelming majority of people simply won't understand what you're going through. Most will automatically think you're being unnecessarily dramatic, that you're exaggerating the situation, that you just need a few months of therapy, or to develop a more positive attitude toward life. But whoever truly understands, because they're also going through this firsthand, who's also going through this painful awakening, knows with absolute certainty that there's nothing dramatic about it, knows it's real and heavy and transformative, knows it literally changes everything in your perception of the world. And finding someone like this in life, even if it's just one person, makes all the brutal difference between going through this completely alone or having at least one firm hand to hold in the darkest and most desperate moments. Jung understood this perfectly because he lived it himself. He knew from his own experience, not just from theory, that awakening to reality as it really is has a very high price. And this inevitable price is the deep and devastating loneliness of someone who sees clearly, while practically everyone else around prefers to continue sleeping comfortably. This specific tiredness you feel isn't character weakness at all, isn't clinical depression in the traditional medical sense, isn't a pathological problem of yours that urgently needs to be fixed with medication or hospitalization. It's your entire psyche signaling real evolution, signaling that you simply can no longer live in the automated way you lived before, that something absolutely fundamental has irreversibly changed inside you and there's no possible return. And this deeply scares, because the overwhelming majority of people naturally prefer to stay exactly where they are, prefer the known even if it's psychologically destructive, prefer collective unconsciousness even if it's existentially limiting and impoverishing. But you no longer have this comfortable option. You've seen too much, you've understood too much, you've evolved too much cognitively and consciously to be able to go back. And this inevitably puts you in an extremely lonely place, in an intermediate place where very few people can truly accompany you, in a place where you have to learn to walk alone, even while physically surrounded by people on all sides. But it's exactly this uncomfortable place, as lonely and scary as it may be, that finally allows you to authentically be who you really are. Without social masks, without convenient pretenses, without having to forcibly fit into external expectations that were never genuinely yours. And then there's that paradoxical and disturbing feeling you know intimately well. You're physically at a completely packed party. You're objectively surrounded by dozens or hundreds of people. You're actively responding to messages on your phone, liking other people's photos, superficially participating in conversations. But you feel subjectively completely alone, isolated, disconnected from everything. It's not simple loneliness from lack of people around. It's much deeper and more painful loneliness from absolute lack of real and genuine connection. For Jung, and he explored this extensively in his work, this happens specifically because you're progressively awakening to your true authentic nature, while absolutely everyone around you remains comfortably in shared collective unconsciousness. You're vibrating at a different energetic frequency than most. You're perceiving layers of reality that others simply don't perceive. You're feeling existential nuances that others don't feel. And there's literally no way not to feel profoundly alone when you're at an expanded level of consciousness that the overwhelming majority hasn't reached yet, may never reach in this lifetime. You physically look around and see everyone apparently laughing, chatting animatedly, having fun, posting happy stories, and you rationally think I should be feeling exactly the same as them, but you simply don't feel it. You just feel a huge and inexplicable emptiness, an unbridgeable abysmal distance between you and absolutely all of that. And you sincerely try to participate, you desperately try to truly connect, but it's as if there's a thick invisible glass permanently separating you from the rest of the world. You see everything happening but can't touch anything real, can't feel anything genuine. And there's another layer to this whole process. The fundamental values of the world have completely stopped making any logical sense to you. Professional success, social status, rampant material consumption, constant external approval, all of this that naturally moves and motivates the overwhelming majority of people simply doesn't move you even a millimeter anymore. You see people literally killing themselves running after a newer and more expensive car, a better and more prestigious corporate position, more virtual likes and more followers, more public recognition and external validation, and you honestly don't feel even a hint of desire to compete in this absurd and endless race. Jung would say, and he studied this deeply for decades, that this is specifically the entire psyche consciously rejecting the artificial collective values imposed by society and authentically seeking much deeper values of the true self, of your real, unconditioned self. You clearly realize, perhaps for the first time in life with this clarity, that you spent entire years, perhaps complete decades, desperately pursuing things that were never really important to you deep down, just external things they insistently told you since childhood should be important, that would define your value as a human being. And now that you've finally woken up, now that you can see through this collective illusion maintained by convenience, you simply can no longer convincingly pretend that these superficial things really matter. You look at that coworker who's literally killing themselves, destroying their mental and physical health, to get a corporate promotion that will bring 10% more salary but 200% more stress, and you just feel genuine pity, not admiration or envy. You see someone publicly flaunting expensive material achievements in well-produced stories, and you just feel a deep emptiness, not envy or desire. Because you finally understood, in a visceral and not just intellectual way, that absolutely none of this fills what really needs to be filled inside you. None of this minimally touches what really needs to be touched in your soul. And then you naturally start to prefer silence in a way that didn't make sense before. Not that uncomfortable and distressing silence that leaves you alone with terrifying and self-destructive thoughts, but that deep and nourishing silence that nurtures you inside, that genuinely returns you to yourself, that reconnects you with something essential. The entire external world has simply become too noisy, too invasive, too chaotic for a soul that's desperately trying to truly hear itself for the first time. Jung saw this specifically as a completely natural and healthy movement of necessary return to the deep interior, where true authentic knowledge silently dwells. You genuinely prefer to stay home alone on a Saturday night, Then go to that social party where absolutely everyone will be performing fake versions of themselves. You prefer to walk alone in silent nature, hearing only the birds and the wind, than to be in a noisy mall crowded with people compulsively consuming. You prefer the monotonous but comforting sound of falling rain to the deafening noise of completely empty conversations that lead nowhere. And this definitely isn't clinical depression, isn't pathological social isolation that needs medical intervention. It's just you finally honestly recognizing what truly does you good, what truly nourishes you deeply, what connects you with something real and authentic inside you that had been asleep for so long. Because the naked truth is that the world out there is absolutely full of incessant noise, constant distraction, brutal superficiality, and you simply no longer have any psychic energy to deal with this daily. You desperately need deep silence to internally process everything that's happening inside you, to understand who you're gradually becoming, to not completely lose yourself in the overwhelming external chaos. And then you clearly realize you can no longer use the social masks you used with such ease before. Before you were an absolute expert at this, master of adaptation. You knew exactly what to say to please each person, how to act precisely to be accepted in each group, which specific version of yourself to strategically present in each different situation to maximize approval. But now, inexplicably, something fundamental has changed inside you. You can no longer fake enthusiasm for things that don't interest you. You can no longer agree with opinions you find shallow just to avoid conflict. You can no longer smile when you don't feel like it. The persona started to crack, and the self is demanding authenticity. Jung would say this is a sign of psychological health, not a social problem. But the world doesn't see it that way. The world expects you to continue performing, continue pretending, continue being who they need you to be. And when you stop doing this, when you dare to be authentic, you become the strange one, the difficult one, the problematic one. But the truth is, you just stopped lying. You just stopped betraying yourself to please others. And this has a cost, has loneliness, has rejection, but it also has freedom, has integrity, has the feeling of finally being who you really are. And there's that strangeness before the roles you play. You look at your life and realize you're performing functions, son, employee, friend, partner, but none of these roles really seems like you. It's as if you're an actor in a play you didn't write, following a script that doesn't make sense, playing a character that isn't yours. Jung called this excessive identification with collective archetypes. You're living the life they expected you to live, not the life you chose to live. And the more you realize this, the more suffocating it gets, because you want to scream who you really are, but you don't even know who this being is that's asking to be born. You spent so much time being what others wanted you to be that now you don't know who you are when no one is looking. And this is terrifying, but it's also the beginning of something new. The beginning of finally discovering who you are beyond expectations, beyond roles, beyond masks. And the world's time is no longer your time. Everyone is running, everyone is busy, everyone is producing, conquering, advancing. And you just want to stop. You want to breathe. You want to think. You want to feel without hurry. Jung would say the soul has its own time. Kairos, not chronos. Not clock time, but internal time, the time of meaning. But the world doesn't allow this. The world punishes those who slow down. The world calls you lazy if you're not constantly producing. The world calls you lost if you're not chasing the same goals as everyone else. And you feel displaced, anachronistic, as if you were born in the wrong era, forced to dance to music that exhausts you just from hearing it. You need slowness, you need contemplation, you need depth, but the world only offers speed, superficiality, endless accumulation. And this tires you in a way no rest can cure. And distractions stopped working. What you used to escape with, series, social media, parties, shopping, none of it anesthetizes anymore. You try to watch something and can't concentrate. You open your phone and feel nauseous with the superficiality of the feed. You go to a party and just want to leave. For Jung, this is the psyche refusing escape mechanisms and demanding confrontation with internal reality. You can no longer run from yourself. You can no longer distract yourself from what's happening inside you. And this is terrifying because now you're face to face with everything you were avoiding, with all the questions you don't want to ask, with all the voids you don't want to face. But it's also liberating because finally you're going to have to deal with this for real. Finally, you're going to have to look inside and make peace with what you find there, however scary it may be. And then you start to see the shadow of the world, not just your own shadow, but the collective shadow. The hypocrisy, the falseness, the cruelty disguised as civilization. Jung said that whoever awakens sees not only their own shadow, but also the collective shadow. You see how the system really works. You see the exploitation, the manipulation, the institutionalized lie. You see that the people who should protect you often oppress you. You see that the institutions that should serve the population often serve only themselves. You see that the world isn't the fair and rational place they taught you. It's a brutal, confused, contradictory place where everyone is fighting to survive, often at the expense of others. And this perception brings deep disillusionment, but also brings truth. You prefer painful truth to comfortable illusion. You prefer to see the world as it is than to continue believing in the edited version they sold you. And this separates you even more from people, because most prefer not to see, prefer to keep illusions intact, prefer to believe everything is fine when clearly it's not. And you realize what you seek has completely changed. You no longer want happiness in the superficial sense of the word. You no longer want immediate pleasure, constant comfort, endless fun. You want meaning. You want purpose. You want truth, even if it hurts. Jung believed the second half of life is dedicated to individuation, not social adaptation. You stop asking, does this make me happy, and start asking, does this have meaning? And this change of question changes everything. Changes your choices, changes your priorities, completely changes the direction of your life. You stop pursuing what the world says you should want and start seeking what your soul really needs. And often these things are completely opposite. The world wants you to accumulate, but your soul wants you to simplify. The world wants you to compete, but your soul wants you to collaborate. The world wants you to show off, but your soul wants you to go deep. And you have to choose. You have to decide if you're going to continue living for the world or if you're going to start living for yourself. And there's that disturbing perception that most are sleeping. You look around and see people living on autopilot, repeating patterns without questioning, believing in things they never examined, pursuing goals they never consciously chose. Jung would say you're awakening from collective unconsciousness. You're beginning to live consciously, questioning, observing, choosing. And this separates you from people who live mechanically. You see someone complaining about the same problems for years, but doing nothing different. You see someone saying they want to change but repeating the same patterns. You see someone sleeping standing up, living a life that isn't theirs. And you don't judge because you also lived like this. You know how comfortable sleep is. But you can no longer go back to sleep. You woke up. And waking up is irreversible. You can't unsee what you saw. Can't unlearn what you learned. And this condemns you to consciousness, to lucidity, to the loneliness of those who see while others sleep. And there's a weight that comes with this. The weight of carrying knowledge that others don't see. You see destructive patterns people repeat without realizing. You see lies everyone accepts as truths. You see suffering that could be avoided if people simply looked a little deeper. But you can't do anything, because people don't want to hear. People feel attacked when you try to show them. People prefer the comfortable lie to the inconvenient truth. And you're left alone with your perceptions, alone with your expanded consciousness, alone with the weight of seeing what no one else sees. And this profoundly tires you, completely isolates you, makes you question if it wouldn't be better to return to ignorance. But you know there's no going back. You know that once you see, you can't unsee. You know the price of consciousness is loneliness, but the price of unconsciousness is betrayal of yourself. And you chose not to betray yourself, even if it means being alone. And that moment comes when you need to make a choice. Be true or be accepted. Because the two things rarely go together. Being true means disappointing expectations. Means saying no when they expected yes. Means refusing roles that aren't yours. Means disappointing people you love. Means being misunderstood, judged, rejected. Jung said individuation requires betrayal of the collective. You have to betray expectations. You have to betray norms. You have to betray what they expected you to be in order to finally be who you are. And there's a part of you that wants so much to be accepted, that wants so much to belong, that considers going back, putting the mask on again, pretending you haven't changed. But there's another part, deeper, more true, that knows it's no longer possible, that prefers authentic solitude to fake company, that prefers to be rejected for who you are than accepted for who you're not. And this choice, however painful it may be, is the choice that frees you. The truth is, this journey is solitary. No one can travel it for you. No one can give you shortcuts. No one can spare you from the pain that comes with growth, with transformation, with awakening. You're going to go through this alone. You're going to carry your own weight. You're going to stumble and get up and stumble again. You're going to doubt if you're on the right path. You're going to want to give up 1,000 times. But this solitude isn't abandonment. This solitude is encounter. Encounter with yourself, with your essence, with your soul, that has been waiting for so long to be seen, heard, lived. And when you finally truly meet yourself, when you finally stop living for others and start living for yourself, something changes. You realize you don't need to belong to the world. You need to belong to yourself. Because what's happening isn't the end. It's the beginning. Beginning of your true life. Of the life you came to live, not the life they told you should live. Jung understood individuation as the birth of the real individual, not the fabricated self. You're being born again. Not from your mother's body, but from your own consciousness. And birth is messy, is painful, is scary. But it's also the most necessary and most beautiful thing that can happen. You're leaving behind the fabricated version of yourself to finally know the real version. You're trading external acceptance for internal integrity. You're choosing meaning instead of comfort, truth instead of illusion, depth instead of surface. And the tiredness you feel isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Wisdom of the body, of the soul, of the psyche that knows you weren't made to live this way. The tiredness is your system telling you something needs to change. That you can no longer sustain a life that isn't yours. That you need to stop betraying yourself to please a world that will never truly know you. And when you finally listen to this tiredness, when you finally accept that you don't belong to this fake world and stop trying to forcibly fit in, then you can start building a life that's genuinely yours. You'll realize that ceasing to belong to the world as it is isn't loss, it's liberation. Liberation from impossible expectations, from destructive comparisons, from the endless race after things that don't matter. You'll realize there's life after this symbolic death. Life more real, deeper, truer. You'll realize the right people will find you on this new frequency. Will recognize you in this new authenticity. Will love you for who you really are, not for who you pretended to be. You'll realize there are places in the world where you can belong being exactly who you are, without editing, without filter, without performance. But before getting there, you need to cross this desert, this dark night, this in-between space where you're alone with yourself, face to face with your deepest truths, with your oldest fears, with your most secret desires. You need to lose yourself to find yourself. You need to dismantle everything to rebuild from scratch. You need to die to be reborn. And this isn't dramatic, isn't an exaggeration. It's literally the process of individuation, of becoming who you really are, of integrating all the parts of yourself you denied, repressed, rejected to fit into a world that was never made for you. The world as it is wasn't made for awakened people. It was made for sleeping people. It was made for those who consume without questioning, for those who obey without thinking, for those who compete without realizing everyone loses in this game. And when you wake up, when you truly open your eyes, you see you can no longer play this game. You can no longer participate in this farce. You can no longer live on the surface pretending everything is fine. And this makes you a foreigner in your own land, a stranger in your own world, lonely in the middle of the crowd. But it also makes you free, makes you true, makes you whole. So yes, the more tired you get of the world, the less you feel you belong to it. But the problem was never you. The problem was always the world. World that values appearances more than essence. That celebrates external success more than internal peace. That rewards conformity more than authenticity. World that teaches you to live outward when all wisdom is within. World that tells you you're never enough when the truth is, you always were. And when you finally understand this, when you finally stop trying to fit into a world that wasn't made for you and start building a world that is, then you find your place. Not in the world as it is, but in the world as it could be. Not in the life they sold you, but in the life you choose to create. This is the invitation that's in front of you now. You can keep trying to belong to a place that rejects you, or you can start building a place that welcomes you. You can keep living for others' expectations, or you can start living for your own truths. About this, you can check in the first pinned comment. But you can keep slowly deteriorating in a life that isn't yours, or you can have the courage to truly live, even if it means being alone for a while, even if it means disappointing those you love, and starting over from scratch. The choice was always yours. You were just too busy trying to please everyone to notice. And when you finally make this choice, when you finally choose yourself, something incredible happens. The tiredness starts to diminish. Not because the world changed, but because you stopped fighting against your own nature. The non-belonging starts to make sense. Not because you're wrong, but because you finally understand it was never about belonging to the world. It was always about belonging to yourself. And you realize you were looking in the wrong place all along. You were looking outside for what you could only find inside. You were asking the world to give you something only you can give yourself. You were waiting for permission to live when the only permission you need is your own. So if you're tired, if you don't feel like you belong, if you're in that space between who you were and who you're becoming, know that you're not alone in this experience. Know that this isn't failure, it's growth. That the path home first goes through the desert, goes through loneliness, goes through the symbolic death of everything you're not so you can finally live everything you are. And on the other side of this journey, on the other side of this tiredness, there's a life waiting for you. And if this video touched something inside you, if you saw yourself in these words, if you felt that someone is finally talking about your experience, leave your like down below, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet, and share this content with someone who's also going through this process. Because sometimes we just need to know we're not alone to have the courage to continue.